Conservatism. You hear that word thrown around all the time, right? But what does it actually mean? For a lot of us, it brings up this, jumble of totally conflicting ideas, making it one of the most confusing terms in all of politics.
So, in this explainer, we're going to tackle that confusion head on. We're going to treat conservatism not as some simple definition, but as a puzzle. And to solve it, we've got to piece together its history and its core ideas. Let's start with the most puzzling piece of all.
And here it is, the real head-scratcher. On one hand, you've got people who call themselves conservatives who are all about free markets, individual liberty, and just getting the government out of the way. But then, on the other hand, the historical version of conservatism was all about defending kings, social hierarchy, and a powerful state. So how on earth can these two completely opposite worldviews share the same label?
And it's really fascinating when you see it visually. Look at this. On the left, you've got a modern protest demanding lower taxes. That's a classic free market idea. And on the right, that's Robert Peel, a 19th century prime minister whose conservatism was about preserving institutions like the monarchy and the church. One group wants to shrink the government's economic power, the other wanted to hold on to the state's traditional power structure. I mean, they look and sound totally different.
Okay, let's just break this down. Today, especially in the US, you hear conservative and you think free market capitalism, individualism, small government. But if you rewind to the very beginnings of conservatism in Europe, it was pretty much the exact opposite. Early conservatives were defending the monarchy, a rigid social order. In fact, many were deeply suspicious of the huge changes that industrial capitalism was bringing, because they saw it as a major threat to that traditional way of life. So, what gives?
To solve this whole puzzle, we have to travel back in time, back to the explosive moment that literally created our modern political language, the French Revolution. Because the answer, believe it or not, starts with something as simple as a seating chart.
Okay, picture this. The year is 1789. We're in Versailles, France. The French Parliament is meeting to debate the future of the entire nation. And the big question on the table is, how much power should the king have versus the people? Well, where the politicians decided to sit that day would echo for centuries to come.
And the origin story is, literally, that simple. All the folks who wanted to preserve the old order, the king, the aristocracy, the church, they all gathered and sat on the right side of the hall. And all the people who wanted radical change, they sat on the left. And just like that, the political right was born from where people happened to be sitting in a room.
Now, this early right wing was personified by thinkers like Joseph de Maistre here. He was what we'd call a reactionary. And that's a term for someone who doesn't just want to slow down change, they want to hit rewind and go back. For him, the revolution was a complete disaster, and he believed that only a return to tradition, authority, and religion could save society from total chaos.
Okay, so if the original conservatives were trying to conserve a monarchy, but today's conservatives are trying to conserve free markets, is there any single idea that connects them? I mean, what exactly are they all trying to conserve?
The connecting thread is this. At its very core, conservatism is about retaining conserving traditional social institutions. It's a philosophy that puts its faith in the established ways of doing things, believing that these traditions contain a kind of hidden wisdom that we probably shouldn't just toss aside for some new, untested idea.
And the person who really spelled this out was the statesman Edmund Burke. Now, unlike that reactionary de Maistre, Burke wasn't against all change. He actually supported the American Revolution, which might surprise you. But he was absolutely horrified by the French Revolution, which he saw as just a reckless attempt to tear down an entire society overnight.
This quote from Burke just nails it. For him, tradition wasn't just about old habits. No, it was the collected wisdom of generations. It was like a partnership between those who are dead, those who are living, and those who are yet to be born. So to throw all that away for some abstract theory was, in his mind, just the peak of arrogance and was bound to lead to disaster.
And that is the solution to our puzzle. Conservatism is relative. Its meaning totally changes depending on what a society's established traditions are at any given moment. So what a conservative wanted to save in 18th century France is completely different from what they want to save in 21st century America. The impulse to conserve is the same, but what they're trying to conserve changes.
So this explains why conservatism isn't just one single thing. It's not a monolith. Since different societies have different traditions, the philosophy itself breaks down into all these different flavors, and each one is focused on conserving a different part of society. Let's look at a few of the big ones you'll see today. You've got your fiscal conservatives. They're all about economic traditions, like balanced budgets and low taxes. Then you have social conservatives, who want to preserve traditional moral values and family structures. And you've also got national conservatives, who are focused on conserving the nation-state itself, its unique culture, its identity, and its borders.
And this is why people who all call themselves conservative can end up in these huge arguments with each other. It's like a tug-of-war. A fiscal conservative who's prioritizing free market traditions is going to pull hard for free trade deals. But a national conservative who's prioritizing local jobs and industries is going to pull just as hard in the other direction for tariffs. See? They're both acting from a conservative impulse, but they're trying to conserve two very different and often conflicting traditions.
So after all that, what's the big takeaway here? Well, maybe the best way to think about conservatism isn't as some fixed checklist of policies, but as something, a little more fundamental.
I think this quote from the British politician Quentin Hogg really puts it perfectly. He called conservatism an attitude, a constant force that you find in any society. It's that deep human need for some stability, for continuity, for a bit of respect for what's come before. It's basically the voice in the room that asks, hey, are we sure we want to change this?
All right, let's recap this whole thing nice and quick. 1. Conservatism started as a reaction, a defense of tradition against the massive upheaval of the French Revolution. 2. Its big unifying idea is preserving the institutions we already have. 3. Because of that, what it means to be a conservative is totally relative. It all depends on the time and place. And 4, this makes it less of a rigid ideology and more of a basic disposition, an attitude that values caution and continuity over calls for radical change.
And all of this leaves us with one final big question. In a world that's defined by constant change, technological, social, political, the central debate for conservatives, and really for all of us, is this: which traditions are the bedrock of our society and which ones are just holding us back? Figuring out what's worth conserving, well, that's the timeless challenge.